What's going on, team? Proof here, and today I'm coming at you with my ARG Nationals Spikes deck profile. And before I get into it, if you don't want to watch the whole video, I'm gonna put the entire deck down below in the description, card for card. I'm not gonna put up a picture of it. And the way that I have it formatted is that the card is gonna be blown up on the right side of your screen. So if you're not familiar with can't talk. If you're not familiar with what the card does, pause the video and read what the card does, because I'm not going to read it as I said. I want to try to take that time away from that and focus more on talking about what the card does in context of the deck. And yeah, let's go ahead and hop into it. So the deck that I chose, if you guys haven't heard already, I ended up winning ARG Nationals with this deck, and it was really hype. It was a whole lot of fun, and I have yet to watch back the video, so I want to do that sometime. I'm thinking about doing it as like a commentary type of thing, where I have it playing on the side and then I kind of talk through what I was thinking at the time that I can remember. But it's an hour long, so I'm not certain if people would be interested in that. So since I'm kind of just still thinking about it, if you want something like that, let me know down below. And yeah, let's go ahead and hop into it. So I'm gonna go from grade 4s down to grade 0s, just cause I feel like that would make the most sense when talking about the cards. So let's go hop into it. So as I said like 6 times already. So the first card we have is, I have 4 Black Horn King Bullpower Agrias, which is my principal stride with the context of the deck. And as I said, these are my go-to first stride option because it helps enable with the best setup is you get 5 guaranteed attacks, and then you have the potential to increase that when you combine it with some of the other cards in the deck. And when you combine that with 4 circles and the fact that cards like Brakki and Juggernaut Maximum get power from being placed, because placed is pretty much from anywhere outside of your hand, or actually it also includes being in your hand as well. Pretty much when you put it onto the rear guard circle from anywhere, really, it's considered being placed down. So it still generates the power, the plus 10k from Brakki, the plus 5 for Wonder Boy if you can put a card back. And those help add up and just put a lot of pressure on your opponent, because if you hit them for like 33 with the Juggernaut Maximum and then bind it and call it back to a 4 circle and have it attack for 33 again, it just puts those beats on your opponent. And that's the main philosophy behind my version of this deck, is to keep that tempo going and put that beat on your opponent over the course of the game. And having Agrias here pretty much just play that to a T. And definitely, I wish, as always, I wish he was a generic flip, so you only get 2 uses out of him, so you need to be very judicious with it. But with the speed of the deck and how aggressive it can be, you probably won't need more than 1 or 2 Agrias to end the game, or you might be dead from your opponent's big swing back turn type of thing. So definitely make the most use out of your 2 Agrias turns and see how far it gets you. And then after that, I have 2 Great Villain Dirty Picaro, and he can be either a second stride, especially when you G-guard ahead of him, or he can be a finishing stride as like a make a field from nothing type of thing, and you just spit out a board and it helps finish off your opponent when they least expect it. And then it's quote unquote the 3rd Agrias, because being able to call any formation from your deck can help you put your field in a scenario where it's kind of ideal if you were on like an Agrias turn, and be able to get those like 5-6 attacks off, especially when you combine it with Mecha Instructor, which I'm going to get to when I get to the grade 0s. And as I mentioned before, as long as you have a card or 2 to stride with and a card in your hand, so 3 cards ideally, maybe two ideally, you can generate a board from nothing and put out a board that can just put out 6 or more attacks on your opponent when they least expect it, which is a huge swing for us, and usually it's enough to end the game there. And over the course of the tournament, I added a second one, thinking that I would need a second one in case I had the additional counterblast come up, but that was never the case. So I'm very certain I'm going to be cutting one in the future as I as I continue to develop the deck out and flesh the deck out. I'm likely going to be removing one and bringing in something else. And then after that, there's 1 Heat Element Merindol, and it was solely played because it could flip for free, which helps accelerate me through to a better Picaro turn. It can help accelerate my GB8 count, and the on hit is kind of not necessary, but just the fact that it's there can make your opponent kind of wiggle and think about what they want to do. And then on your triple drive, you can hit criticals or stand triggers, and then have your rear guard still put the pressure on your opponent. Then we got one air element Sebreeze, and it was used only in case somebody played the grade 2 game, but I don't know if that's going to be necessary, because if my opponent is on grade 2 and I ride to General Seifried, what Seifried can do with his pressure, in my opinion, considering the nature of the deck and you're not trying to accelerate to GB8 as your plan A, you're going to get more mileage out of Seifried's on hit ability, plus being able to filter your deck out for triggers, than you would off of a vanilla Sebreeze turn. And then you can save that counterblast for a follow-up Picaro turn, or an Agrias turn, or a full power Agrias turn with the heal if you G-guard on your opponent's turn when they finally get to grade 3. So there's a good chance it might be cut, but this is the nature of that spikes don't have a lot of other good strike options that work cohesively together. So it might stay out of just that and just continue to be flip fodder, and then, hey, I need it, so here's CB2, play a Sebreeze. Then there's one Hellhard 8. He is my plan C. So plan A is beat him down with Agrias. Plan B is to finish him off with Picaro. And plan C, if it comes to it, I'm going to get to GB8 as smoothly as I can and try to beat you over the head with Hellhard 8 plus 4 circles, which ended up coming into play in the final game against my opponent, which is a really cool guy, really nice people all around. And as I mentioned, it takes incredible advantage of having 4 circles, because he kind of acts as a 4 circle himself, because his boost activates when a unit attacks. So when a unit attacks, it can give the boost to itself and get an additional 10k. If that unit is on a 4 circle, you just add another increment of 10 to your attack and then hit your opponent with it. So that comes into play with if you have a Juggernaut Maximum come down on a 4 circle, he attacks with 1 boost, he's a 43,000 instead of a 33,000. So that's a really big difference. So it definitely just adds up. And it makes good use of your access spike bouncers and counterblast, because you can combine Spike Bouncer with his skill. He'll counterblast 1 to get you another call to use, and then after he attacks, you can counterblast again, put him to the soul, and draw you a card, which extends your Hellhard 8 sequence as you got a good high powered attack on your opponent. So it's like a nice little chain of events there that helps us out a lot. And another big thing that comes into play is that with the way Hellhard reads, if you give a card the boost and the power, you don't have to immediately put it into the soul, so it can remain on the field. So if I later call out something like Mecha Instructor, I get another use out of that card in the same capacity I would for Hellhard 8, except now I just pretty much have like a 5th or 6th copy of that card in my deck and be able to use it to attack my opponent with it, which really comes in handy, especially when you combine it with Black Panther and Juggernaut Maximum. As for the G guards, the first one here, I played 3 King of Interference Terrible Linus. He's a really big guard for a low cost. If you have 2 empty circles, he becomes 25k shield. If you have 4 open circles, he becomes 35k shield. And depending on the way the game plays out, you can get the full power from him, which makes 48,000 for your Vanguard, which in some cases it becomes a 2 to pass, 3 to pass, or a no pass, depending on if your opponent is boosted or have power on their own or whatnot. It helps accelerate me to Hellhard 8 if I need it to, but with the way the deck is shaping up, not being so focused on Hellhard 8, I think might be able to get away with playing 2 of him. And because the reason you played 3 in the previous era was because it allowed you to go into Sebreeze and then go triple G guard into Hellhard 8 off of 3 Linuses. However, I don't know if that's necessary anymore with this deck, and I'm kind of getting to a comfort level to where I might remove the 3rd Linus and just play 2 of them. But as it was with Sebreeze, there's not a ton of viable spike options in the stride department to where that might not be necessary, so you can just play the 3 and then find cuts elsewhere. Then I played 2 durable barrier Hecaton Gyace, which was really good for helping me put triggers back that I can later shuffle up with Brakki, Juggernaut Maximum, Wonder Boy's main phase skills. I can also put back the aforementioned Brakki, Juggernaut, Wonder Boy trio, the Triumvirate, put them back to the deck. That way I can keep their chain calls going. And helps me put back grade 1s that Wonder Boy can't come back, because that's the only hole in his return game, is that he can't put grade 1s back because you don't want the infinite loop there. So Bushiroad was kind of heads up on that. And then it helped put back your power hitters ahead of you going into Hellhard 8. So it helps put back like your Panthers, your Juggernaut Maximums, your Brakkis. It helps put those back to the deck. That way you can have them at the bottom so you don't check them with Hellhard 8, assuming you don't shuffle ahead of time. That way they're guaranteed to be there as you go through your sequence, unless you draw it with a Spike Bouncer or something like that. So I really love the card. It helps so much, and it's an easy 25k shield, which is 38 with the 13k base that's offered by the Vanguards, which is often enough to stop any rear guard attack, unless like some craziness happens. Excuse me. Then I got 2 Dark Element Dizmel. The entire purpose of Dizmel is to stop them from hitting my Juggernaut, Brakki, or Panther that sits in the front row. That's the only reason it's played, and I played 2 of them because people love to swing at it, and if I can protect them twice and then hit them over the head with it multiple times, then I come out better in that exchange. And that's kind of where you want to be, is coming out ahead of the exchanges that you have with your opponent. So I ended up adding a second Dizmel after talking with the people in my chat, and it paid off dividends big over the weekend. There was a couple games where I had used it twice to protect something, and then just proceeded to use the main phase skill, call out a fresh one, and then just keep hitting my opponent with it over and over again. Alright, for the grade 3s, first grade 3 is my 4 General Seifried. He's my primary grade 3 ride. Often he was only used for the gift generation, because if I went second, I would immediately go into striding, so I would never need to use his on-hit ability. But there was a couple times where that on-hit ability paid off for me, especially when going first. Like, even if I just put a boost, like a little 8k booster behind it, if my opponent is on a 9k grade 2 or a 10k grade 2, it hits for like, on average, like 21 to 26,000, which is often enough to force my opponent to PG it, which means they don't have a PG in the future. And it helps against Protect clans because you hit them with that attack before they can get the Protect generation. So it kind of just puts them on the back foot going ahead of their turns. So if you put a Protect clan to 3 or 4 damage right as before you go into your Agrias combo, then you just keep having that tempo going ahead and just eventually just pays off and just consistent beats. And after that, there's 4 Juggernaut Maximum. He's my best consistent beater just because it just gains power for existing. It doesn't need to do anything else, doesn't have to do anything different. And against the 12k and the 13k bases that exists with when you combine the standard stuff over into premium, it forces 15k shield no matter what, like, which helps pays off big. Or if it's on a 4 circle, it attacks for 33, which forces out what's that, 30k shield if my math is right, or 25k minimum. So my best consistent beater, I would always try to make sure I had at least 1 or 2 in the deck. So I would return it with Gyace or return it with Wonder Boy, just in case I needed it for like a Picaro turn, or if it made it to Hellhard 8, it was there just because I love to have it there just waiting to be called out. And if worse comes to worse, it still gives you a gift, so you can still ride it ahead of striding, get you your gift, and start going into your stride turn sequences. And as I mentioned, it's really great with Agrias and Picaro just for being able to attack over and over again for that high power. And as it is with the trio, which I want to mention in all the slides here, is that it's a deck thin and it's a shuffle outlet, just to help get your deck smaller and more compressed, and to distribute the cards you put back into your deck and shuffled up really well. And we got 4 Spike Bouncer, who is probably one of my favorite cards in the deck because it offers so much utility, and it's my best grade 3 ride, and you always want to try to have at least one counterblast to be able to use it going into your turn. It helps promote the tempo, the aggression strategy that we like to employ, because you just place it down, counterblast, you soul blast out your Mecha Trainer. Spoiler alert, I play the new Mecha Trainer. Check the top 2, and if you get Garry Gannon, you put it behind Vanguard, or you put it on the rear guard just to put that on hit pressure on your opponent, and then filter your deck out some more and evidently, or just plus on your opponent. Get Brakki, being an aggressive beater, get high roll into Juggernaut Maximum if you need to. Sometimes you might hit a double trigger, and that's just kind of the nature of using a skill over and over again. You're going to get the low rolls, you're going to get the medium rolls, you're going to get the big high rolls. That's just kind of the nature of the top check type of cards. But when you're on grade 3, you just get more checks, and then when you're on grade 4, especially if your hand's kind of awkward ahead of an Agrias turn, you can call out Spike Bouncer, preferably on your gift circle. Check your top 4, maybe call out Juggernaut, Brakki, Panther to your other side, and now they become a constant threat that your opponent needs to deal with on your Agrias turn as well. So if you have 2 counterblasts on your Agrias turn, wouldn't be surprised if your hand is bad to use one on Spike Bouncer, then use the other one on Agrias himself. So really good card, probably the best grade 2 in the deck, especially early on. So definitely mulligan for it. Of course, if you already have a ride, try not to be too greedy. But your early game is so much better if you have Spike Bouncer than without it. And like I mentioned before, it chains with Hellhard to attack and then draw. And then we got 4 Highspeed Brakki, aka Base Bunny. Leave my bunny alone, as I said a lot to people this weekend. He's your best beater before you stride, in that you can call it out on your grade 2 turn for 20k. I like putting it with a Gannon behind it because it hits for 28k, which just messes with your opponent's guard strategy, especially if you go double Gannon behind Vanguard and behind Brakki, and your opponent wants to risk that one to pass so much because of what the filtering that you can do with Garry Gannon and whatnot. And it becomes 38k on a 4 circle with an 8k, or 30k on it by itself, which is a decent number just because being able to hit over 28,000 is a solid benchmark to have when you combine this premium or the standard stuff over. So definitely a benchmark you want to hit is over like 28 to 38. Just hit those benchmarks because you hit over the Force clans, or of course you can need to deal with the Excel Protect clans as well, but 38, 28 or 28 to 38 is a safe benchmark to hit, which Brakki can do very easily. And like Juggernaut, just that shuffle outlet, being able to filter itself out of the deck and then call on a fresh one to be able to attack your opponent with it. And it's easy enough to put it back into the deck to where you don't need to worry about it too much. Just be mindful of it, so that way you can know when to put a bunny back to the deck for later. Next up, we got 4 Treasured Black Panther. He is low-key MVP from this weekend. He helped out so much with that flexible soul blast option that he has. Like if you have him on a 4 circle with an 8k behind it on your Agrias turn, you can soul blast 1 and attack with it, and it attacks for 33,000, which is becoming the new perfect number you want to strive for, which just annoys the opponent so much. And then you can call it back out, and then you have the option to soul blast 1 and hit him for 25 or hit him for 35. Of course you lose it after that battle, but it might put you far enough ahead to where your follow-up Agrias, your follow-up Picaro turn will knock your opponent out. So super flexible, gives you a soul blast outlet, that way you can get your bunnies and your Juggernaut Maxims out of soul. That way you don't need to worry about using Gyace on them and get them back with Wonder Boy. A great combo with Mecha Instructor, which I believe I discovered as playing over the weekend. So the way it works is, if you have a charging Mecha Instructor, should I play 10? Nah, I'll say it here because then I can always reiterate it there. So you have a charging Mecha Instructor, you can boost it on the Panther, Soul Blast for the Panther, and have him attack with the +15. And the way it works is that charge activates at the end of the battle the unit is involved in, and Panther activates at the end of the battle. So you do skill resolution, you resolve charge first, which sends Mecha Instructor back to the deck, and then Mecha Instructor will activate and you can use his skill to bind Panther and call it back out to the same force circle it was just on. So then you have another chance to Soul Blast for another plus 15. So then you just knock your opponent over the head again with that, which ended up coming in handy more often than I expected. So definitely something to think about going into the future. And as I say here, it's scary for your opponent to face down Panther when he's at 5, he or she is at 5. Or if you're trying to force your opponent to get to 5, it helps hit with that power to hit over the top, because with the Soul Blast ability, he's your highest natural attacker, but you lose him at the end of the battle. So something to think about for your soul use and your skill timing to figure out when to use the 5k versus the 15k. So for the grade 1s, first we have 4 Commander Garry Gannon, which, as I've hyped up personally, being the best grade 1 the clan got coming out of Destructive Roar. It's a huge consistency bump, because it helps turn probably decent hands to good hands, or it turns good hands to great hands, and so on and so forth. Because being able to draw those 2 cards deeper into your deck probably nets you those 2 cards you needed to be able to be most aggressive the following turn. And that's something that you really want to have, is just being able to constantly keep putting that pressure out over and over again. And in and of itself is on hit pressure. So many times people tried to one to pass my Vanguard attack. Sometimes I hit it, sometimes I didn't, but the fact that they used that card early on meant they didn't have it for later. So if I checked the critical trigger, or if I had multiple rear guards out and checked the stand trigger, they just didn't have it, so I still got that damage in on them. And that meant Garry Gannon stuck around for the following turn to do it all over again. So up until 4 damage, like, Garry Gannon is going to be that constant threat your opponent needs to worry about, especially if they protect it early. They need to just keep protecting it later and later and later. So eventually it just kind of catches up to them, and it helps you come out ahead in that exchange. And yeah, that's really about it. It's an overall solid card, and I can't see myself using less than 4 of them in any Spike Brothers deck going into the foreseeable future. Then we got 4 Wonder Boy, the bread and butter. Easy power gain, easy deck refresh, a 13k booster on demand if you need it to be, which comes in handy more than you might think. It's really great when you're doing a full Agrias turn to have a Wonder Boy or 2 out to boost up your rear guards you have in front of him, just because it is a 13k booster when you use it and you have ample drop zone to recycle back. And yeah, just a really solid card. And I used to play 3 in my first iteration of this deck, but eventually it just kind of like, it just made most sense to play 4 and cut out one of the other cards, just because having 4 potential uses of Wonder Boy meant that it was 4 extra uses of either a Juggernaut, Brakki, Panther, or just putting triggers back to your deck to be able to shuffle in for later, especially if you doubled up on the main phase skill to use Wonder Boy's main phase skill first, call it out, use the skill to put a trigger back, and then you resolve the beginning of the main phase skill of your Brakki or Juggernaut to then shuffle that trigger back to your deck as you pull another Brakki or Juggernaut from your deck. So you've thinned your deck out by an additional card, and you supplemented it with an additional trigger, which meant that your chance of hitting that trigger went up enough to where it mattered. So especially helps out with the crits being on the lower end to make space for the stand triggers in here. Then we got 3 Acrobat Verdi, solely used so that I didn't need to stride with Juggernaut, because you wanted to have him as a beater option. You don't really care if you strode with General Seifried. It was nice to be able to ride an additional Seifried to get another force circle. So ideally you had two force circles somewhere on the board, maybe stacked together or split 1-to-1 depending on the situation, and then striding with the rest of them. But the best case scenario is that you didn't want to have to stride with your Juggernaut Maximum. And I played 3/4 because the 5k shield is such a huge detriment that you definitely didn't want to rely on it to protect yourself if you needed it to. So I used that space to get another standard grade 1 into the deck, which brings us to Gyro Slinger here. And the main Gyro Slinger is the weakest grade 1 in the deck, but it has enough utility in what it does is that it earned those 2 spots that it takes up. And it came into play a few times to where if you can call it out, you can use his skill and then you can roll a chance to land on another, either get your first, say you ride a non-spike bouncer grade 2, you can call out Gyro Slinger, put a card from your hand to the soul, check your top 2, and if you land Spike Bouncer, you can call Spike Bouncer and then resolve Spike Bouncer skill, and now you have a full front row potentially, which is very nice trade-off in my opinion, just because of how much strength that Spike Bouncer has. And it's really good as a potential combo piece for your Picaro turn or for an Agrias turn when you combine it with Mecha Instructor, because if you use all your counter blasts to activate Agrias or Picaro, Gyro Slinger becomes a free option to be able to combine with your Mecha Instructor to get yourself another attack going. So the way it works is that you charge your Mecha Instructor when it returns. As long as you have an empty front row circle, you can bind Gyro Slinger, call Gyro to that empty open circle, and then you can resolve Gyro Slinger's ability. And you can call a card out because it doesn't need to be called to an open circle anymore. It just needs to be called to R. So you retire the card that you have on the occupied circle, that goes away, replaced with the fresh unit. And if you split in that game, if you split your 4 circles, you now have an 18,000 Gyro Slinger, and then you have insert unit here +5 or +15 in the case of being on a 4 circle, ready to attack your opponent. Really handy if your opponent has 5 damage on low hand. And it almost came into play, well, a variation of it using Spike Bouncer instead almost came into play, but my opponent checked the trigger, so I had to audible into a different formation and go into full power mode, and it ended up working out. But the fact you have that option available is so huge for your long-term game planning. So that's why I added the second one in there. It didn't come into play too often, but in the case that my deck was low in one of my early games, I called out Gyro Slinger, used his skill, saw that my deck was low, and resolved it and put triggers to the bottom. And then I resolved Agrias to look at the top 4 again, called out a card, and pushed those triggers that I stacked at the bottom up to the top of my deck, and they were there to be checked. That's how low my deck was, because that's how long the game went. So he kind of turned Gyro Slinger into low-key Tsukiyomi. So just kind of just make things up on the fly, and just like, it's like, oh yeah, like I can really do that. That's what I love about spikes, and it's kind of what these cards enable. So for the grade 0s, you got 4 Cheer Girl Marilyn, which is the new PG. It saved me grade 1 space, and as you can see, I used the space to the maximum capacity that I felt was right for the time. And I didn't mind that it got locked out by the Itchy Tom combo, because if it ever got to that point, I was likely not going to live anyway, to where a normal PG wasn't going to be enough to save me, because I don't think it would have mattered in the long run. So I figured I would just protect myself early against Oracle Think Tank, where I expected to see Itchy Tom, and then focus more on putting the pressure on them to where it kept my damage low, to then I can finish them post Itchy Tom, assuming I didn't die, and then I can finish them off with the previous combos that I mentioned up to this point. And it worked out. I ended up playing Itchy Tom player a couple times. He was a really cool guy, and he did use Itchy Tom if I remember correctly, but he missed on his triggers and I got a trigger, so it didn't matter that Tom was on the board, and it gave me the damage I needed to be able to use my Agrias and or Picaro at the time, and it was enough to overcome it. So you play concerned about it, but you don't want it to impact your deck building to the point to where it's a detriment, because you won't always run into the Itchy Tom decks. And yeah, I respected it, but I didn't want it to rule my entire deck at the time, so I played around it. Then we got the big combo piece here that I've kept mentioning up to this point in Mecha Instructor. So it can help turn your Agrias into 6+ attacks because you call it behind your card that's on the 4 circle most likely, and then it can attack boosted, and then you use Agrias to bind your board, get your card draw in, and then you call out your board again, and then you charge the Mecha Instructor, and then you attack with the other side. That's your 5th attack. And then you resolve the Mecha Instructor. You can probably use the card you drew off of Agrias for a net 0. Then you can bind the unit that it boosted, call it back out, and get your 6th attack in. And if you can combine it over the course of a couple turns, you just got 12 attacks on your opponent, which could be enough to knock them out. Or with Picaro, if you guys remember that image I posted up a while ago where it was like 4 Mecha Instructors with a Juggernaut Maximum in the middle. You're able to combine all the bind and recalls to be able to keep dancing your Juggernaut Maximum around the board and attack with that multiple times. So your attack number becomes 1 plus whatever the number of your Mecha Instructors are. And commonly I use Mecha Instructor on Picaro turns to maybe combine it with the Gyro Slinger Spike Bounce that I mentioned before, because oftentimes if your opponent's hand is low, being able to get 2 attacks off that are decently powered over getting 1 big attack off might be enough to deplete them of their resources to where if they live that turn, they can't do anything, and now your hand is stocked with 4 cards minimum because of Agrias, or 3 cards because of Picaro, which will probably be enough to overcome, or it'll be enough to knock your opponent out. And this, I tested it with it after people in my Discord shared game footage of them using it, and I was kind of skeptical on it, and I was like often wavering on it. And my wife can vouch for me where day of the tournament, like I slept on it, and I was gonna go 8 crit, and I was like, my gut tells me I need to play these Mecha Instructors here. So I swapped out 3 of the crits for 3 of the Mecha Instructors, because talking with my Discord kind of came to a consensus that 3 was enough to be able to use what we needed it for. And then we made space for another trigger in there, and it paid off big because of what it can do. And another thing I didn't mention here is that it helps us play around Gyro to where they need to choose between Denial Griffin or Defeat Flare. And with Picaro, if you can check that it can't have a Defeat Flare as an option, you can set up your board such that you can still get off about 3 or 4 attacks off despite them having Denial Griffin, which is really good. And if your opponent is like holding back, trying to stop your attacks from working, you can still use the bind recall. And then especially if you combine it with Spike Bouncer or Gyro Slinger to just get more attacks off for your opponent when they don't want to see those extra attacks off, or when they expect it to stop your whole formation. So a lot of things to think about off of this one single card, and I'm really glad I added it. It's a amazing stand trigger, and it also came in handy in the early game as well. Like the 5k power boost was a factor sometimes, which is a downside to it because your attacks can still be not as powerful, or as a defensive trigger, it's not enough to stop you from needing to bleed out some cards. But the upside is so big that it kind of negates the downside to being a 5k trigger boost still. So great card, I'm glad I added it, and it was probably one of the biggest differences in me being able to overcome some of the decks I played against. And then for the other triggers, I played 4 new Tiara, 4 new Silence Joker, and 1 new Sonic Breaker. That 1 Sonic Breaker was a low-key MVP because it helped me come over the top of my first round top 16 opponent, thanks to hitting a clutch double critical trigger late in the game when it mattered the most. So definitely having that extra plus the extra 15k shield over the 10k shield that the stand offers was also a major factor, which is why I wanted to add it over an additional draw trigger or playing full vanilla lineup. And I'm really glad I added that 5th one in there, just because it kind of gives you that peace of mind knowing that you still have a chance to hit that critical trigger if you need it the most, just to put that most pressure on your opponent. And finally, got one new Mecha Trainer, and it's used mainly for a consistency bump because a lot of times I would draw for turn and I would have like grade 1s, a couple grade 2s, but no grade 3. Ride my grade 1 and I would draw General Seifried. That happened so many times that it stuck into my memory. So being able to be that consistent bump to let me get cards in my deck that I will want to have in hand versus being damaged. And there's a rare chance that your opponent gives you 2 damage on their first turn attacking before you go into grade 2, and then you can ride a Spite Bouncer, use his skill, and you can roll another Spite Bouncer. So you call that Spite Bouncer and resolve that one because it activates when it's placed and it's not from hand. It doesn't need to be from hand, I should say. And then you can Counter Blast, Soul Blast your grade 1 that you rode, check your top 2 again, and you can call either another front row unit or you can call a back row unit. So you've plussed your field by 2 off of your opponent just giving you 2 damage, and you probably swung the entire flow of the early game in your favor. And that's what's huge about, that's the biggest reason that I wanted to play new Mecha Trainer, was that potential to go double Spite Bouncer. And the draw was a big contributing factor to that as well. And as much as I love OG Mecha Trainer, what new Mecha Trainer gave to the deck was far and away better, to where I didn't miss old Mecha Trainer over the course of the weekend. Like if you played a version, or if you do play a version where you take out a couple Marilyn and make space for, say, Alma or something like that, one of the grade 1 PGs, I could see you make a case to play OG Mecha Trainer if you're fearing the Itchy Tom deck, to where you can freely search it out and then have that option available to you. So for this deck, I love the new Mecha Trainer, and I'm glad I used it. I'm glad I played it as it was. So that's the entire deck. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you so much to everybody that gave me kind words, a whole lot of support. Shout out to my wife for being there with me. Shout out to everybody that was my own little personal rooting section, and came away with the trophy. So hope you guys enjoyed. Look out for more. I'm gonna be doing a tournament breakdown sometime in the near future. Yeah, hope you enjoyed it, and until next time, peace, be easy.